Hello, it's me, Athena popping up at the beginning of my podcast again, and it's the usual warning that I have to give every now and again to say the sound quality isn't quite what I would like it to be. What can I say? This is free content, it's self-produced, and I'm not a very good producer, and I'm still getting to grips with this online recording thing, because obviously people can't come to keep my company because of well, we know why. Let's not mention it anymore. We're all sick of it. Anyway. Quality of the sound, terrible. Quality of the conversation, sublime. I promise you. Please put up with it. You will not even notice all the scratchiness. I call it scratchiness. I don't know what it is, but it's weird. You won't notice it though, because the conversation, I promise you, is sublime. So enjoy. My name is Athena. I'm a stand-up comedian, writer, broadcaster and podcaster, also a parent, which is great, but as you will know if you listen to this podcast, my child is still too young to say anything than the basics, bubbles, I want, no, and cry. So those aren't words that you can make sentences out of. So to keep my sanity and to keep myself, working, I invite people around to keep my company. And today I haven't invited someone round because it's illegal and that would get me a big fine. But I am talking to Vicki Amedume. How are you, Vicki?
I'm good.
Yeah? Are you really good though?
Do you know what? I think that question, how are you, has completely lost its meaning now. Because if I told you how I really was, this podcast would turn out very different from what you're hoping.
I have no hopes. Every time I press record, I have no idea where I'm going to end up. One guy who's a really good friend of mine, I found out he's a fine artist. No idea.
Oh, wow.
Had no idea. So this could turn into, you could tell me you're a serial killer, you could confess the crimes once committed as a youth, anything could happen. Feel free to just get it off your chest. I've struggled with that sentence, how are you? Because I am fine, but I'm filled with dread about the future. I can't perform stand-up until next year. That's my job.
Yeah.
So, and you're in the performing arts. Can you talk a bit about what you do? Because you've got, I'm not even saying this, you do genuinely have probably the best job of everybody I know. Genuinely.
So, I'm a circus artist. I trained as a circus artist. I worked for years in different circuses and dance shows and in theatre. And now I run a contemporary circus company.
Let's talk about the fact you're a circus artist. I'm going to ask the one question that all circus artists should be asked. Can you do a backflip?
Of course. Well, I used to be able to do a backflip. I haven't done one for a while.
It's one of those skills that I sort of think if someone can do a backflip, you don't need no GCSEs. Like, that's what more do you need in life? Those are your qualifications. Give this person money.
A lot of people can do backflips. You need a bit more than that in your back.
How do you practice? What do you do to eventually learn how to do one? What's the steps of becoming a backflipper?
So you get somebody you trust to support you, and you kind of learn the movement pathways, and you repeat, and as you go, the person who's supporting you kind of takes away the support bit by bit by bit, and eventually you're just doing it.
So I can't make backflipping a lockdown skill. I need to have another person with me within proximity.
Well, unless your daughter is a lot more mobile than she appears to be at the moment, I'd wait until you can get into a proper training space.
I would crush the child. It wouldn't be worth it. Can we talk about how you got into circus? I know you probably talk about this a lot, but I love the circus in a way that when I have the opportunity to go, I go and watch, and I'm always like anyone who knows what the circus is but isn't familiar with. It's just all awe-inspiring for me. It's death-defying and it's fantastic, but it's very difficult for me to look at it and think, oh, I want to do that, because it feels so far away from my own physical ability. So how did you decide I want to get into circus? What was that thought process?
Oh, wow. I kind of just fell into it.
Not literally, because obviously...
That was a joke, but that was weak. I'm really sorry. I got into it kind of by accident. I was studying at university to become a scientist. And honestly, that had been my dream since I was a kid. I really wanted to kind of be a proper scientist with the lab coat, doing research and, maybe winning a Nobel Prize. But whilst I was at university, I ended up living across the street from this kind of group of feminists, circus, kind of free living, wild women. And I just kind of completely fell in love with them. They were amazing, political, and they took me to their training space, and I got onto the trapezes, and they gave me some lessons, and I was terrible. I hadn't really ever done anything like that before, but there was something about it that just felt amazing and made me feel like I had the possibility of being superhuman.
So these corrupting feminists are the reason why we don't have a
damn feminists
corona. Right? You'd have invented that vaccine already, right? But you was too busy following these political troublemakers. Can I just say that's one of the most romantic university stories I've ever heard? Like, I was living across the road from these kind of feminist political trailblazers who showed me the circus, and I went and I fell in love with it. And so it started off maybe as a hobby, and then you decided to pursue it vocationally.
Yeah, I come from an African family, so there was never an option that I would do anything other than doctor, lawyer, scientist. Like a proper job. And I think when you come from a first generation immigrant family, you think really seriously about what you do with your life, because you understand what being poor is. So there wasn't really a thought in my head about pursuing a career as being a circus artist. But it just kind of captured me, and every time I thought I would leave and do something else or go back to science or another career, I'd always find myself in a training space, kind of working on someone with a show and almost being like, how did I get here again?
When you started, did you find anything really, you said it was really, you did it and it was like really difficult, but once you started to practice it and do it more, was there anything that you found really hard? That you thought, I know I like it, but I'm not like enjoying this particular aspect?
Gosh, it's physically challenging, but the physical challenge isn't the hardest part about choosing a career in something that's kind of quite an unstable industry. You're a stand-up comedian. I think it was the whole lifestyle around it. So when you're training, you really commit to a lifestyle. You need to train all the time. And it becomes a bit of an obsession. So I wouldn't go anywhere unless I knew I was able to access a training space. So for years I didn't even think about going on holiday because it would be a break in my training. And it wasn't an easy space to make a living in. It was always a bit of a struggle between how you earn an income when you're following your passion.
Yeah, I think that's the eternal struggle, especially when it's something that's considered maybe like almost like a bit niche. If you tell someone you're, I don't know, an actor, then, you've got theatre, you've got TV, you've got drama. But if you tell someone you work in circus, people's minds don't have as much to latch onto in terms of, well, what do people exchange money for in terms of seeing circus performers, right?
Absolutely.
What did you ever do? Did you have like a side hustle to help you out? Were you in like call centers in the day and like trapeze at night?
So bizarrely enough, my side hustle, I had two. So whilst I was at university, I worked for a wine retailer called Odd Bins, and I trained to be a sommelier.
Shut up! Do you remember? That's exactly what I said. I find out all these things people know. Let's talk about this. Forget circus. You know about wines. Amazing. Yeah. So you trained to be.
I trained. So I would often do some of that kind of work on the side, and then I also did a master's in computer science. So I did a little bit of a side hustle in database design.
You design data, but knowing a little bit about database design, purely nothing about it. I've just commissioned people to do it. I know how hard that is.
It is hard and it is boring.
It is boring, but once it's done, the problems you can solve with a good database are amazing. And I'm guessing that
people get really excited about databases.
I'm only one of those people. It's because I've worked in places who haven't. I've worked with people who haven't understood that, and their data's a mess.
Yeah.
And it's just a nightmare trying to fix it because they haven't even stored the data correctly in the first place to fix it. I'm also excited because I'm highly confident that you know how to use Microsoft Access.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, which is like that's. You're either a stonemason or you can use Microsoft Access. Those are the two things that make you part of a particularly secretive sect, as far as I'm concerned. There should be little rings and a secret handshake for people who can use Microsoft Access. Anyway, I digress. This makes you a very resourceful person, Vicki. We've been going for 12 minutes, and I just feel like there was probably a hell of a lot more that I don't know about what you've got in your brain.
Probably. I mean, that's one of the things that's kind of characterised all the stupid choices I've made in my life, is that I've always kind of followed what is exciting to me and what is a space of curiosity.
That doesn't feel
so it's kind of led me to lots of weird places.
That doesn't feel like a stupid thing at all. When you say weird places, does anything come to mind? Do you think, wow, I can't believe my nose led me to this place?
Oh God. So many things, Athena. So many things. And, I need to be careful because, one day I might want to have a political career. So...
I would love for you to be a politician. I always think the issue with politicians is they haven't lived. They've gone to university and they've studied PPE, not the PPE we need now, the useless PPE. And they've come out of university and they've interned and then they've become a councillor or they've worked for an MP's office and then they go into Parliament and then they tell us how to live our lives. It's like, you lost your virginity last week, mate. Who are you talking to? Like, not that it's like, it's fine away. I don't want to virginity shame anyone. You can lose your virginity whenever.
Absolutely.
This is what you get what I'm trying to communicate. These people
I get it. I think it's people who've never really had to struggle for anything.
Yeah.
And they make the assumption that everybody has kind of lived a similar life to them. And I think the one thing that I've gained as an experience is kind of walking in all these different paths. I've seen the way that people live in different circumstances, and I make no assumptions about how people live and survive these days.
Yeah, that's why, right, Vicki for mayor. Done. You've got my vote. I did my last Edinburgh show about leadership, and the premise is basically what we're talking about now. The whole premise was I've always said I would probably be quite a good leader, or I'd probably be quite good in politics. I care about people.
I can see that.
Yeah, I care about people. I'd like to think that I can string a sentence together, and I'm quite practical and progressive. So I'm more interested in what's a solution rather than what would be the dogmatic or ideological thing, right? However, my closet is so full of skeletons, like literally, it's like a grave site. It should be a museum or something. It's ludicrous. Archaeologists would just like never have to work again.
Can I just say, Boris Johnson doesn't even know how many kids he's got.
He's
doing all right.
He's an old rich white guy. Okay, he can do what he likes. All right. And the funny thing, it's so funny because when I did my show, I was pregnant, so the whole joke was like, and at the time, I mean, it's all worked out in the end, but at the time, like, I was single, I'd only known the guy for about 2 months when I got knocked up, so the whole thing was like, that was the nail in my political coffin, right? Like, I'm pregnant on this stage going, well, that's the end of it, isn't it, really? This is not going to happen for me. And at the same time, Boris Johnson, I think, or there'd been conversations at that point about some child that had come out the woodwork or whatever. But I'm a woman, right? So I can't say, oh my God, what a surprise! Like this, I had no idea. Like, so that's something that I always struggle with. When people, it's really weird that people kind of deny white privilege when it's kind of there in front of us every day. That doesn't mean that every white person benefits from it in the same way, but the fundamental core.
But that's not the purpose, and that's that's a deliberate misunderstanding of what you're talking about when you're talking about that kind of privilege. It's about systems, not individuals. And, you know, what is that phrase? Tyranny is the absence of nuance.
Yeah, it's so true. And people you're absolutely right. They willfully misinterpret what they're saying to perhaps play their part in maintaining the structure. Maybe they don't know what they're doing. You know, maybe that's in the instruction book that all white people get. Like, deny privilege at all costs. You know, even if you're being tortured, deny it.
It's really interesting because I think it's an unconscious thing. So my partner is white, and we get into sometimes these really deep conversations. And he's amazing. You know James.
I know James. Yes.
You know, he is the gentlest, kind of most open human being that I know. But even there are times when I'm talking to him where he'll make excuses for things and people. It's just like this divergence in understanding of the world that's based on experiences that I've had, he's never had, and will never see. Actually, can I tell you a story about us going on a holiday together?
Absolutely.
A couple of years ago, we decided we were going to go on a holiday, and that was our first kind of big holiday together. And he was kind of busting out all these holiday destinations that we can go to. And each one, I was a bit like, not sure. Not because I didn't want to go there, but you know what it is to be a black woman travelling in places where not a lot of other black people are.
The stories I have. Prague, Morocco, Tunisia, Turkey. Yeah, I know.
And he was like, you're making a big deal out of this. It's nothing. Let's just go on holiday and we'll have an amazing time. 2 days in Vietnam, after being stared at, touched, people stopping to take photos of us, people asking us if we could breed, he was like, oh, yeah.
And what's really frustrating, two things that are frustrating. I do know James, and he is lovely. I can co-sign this. She's not making, it's not biased. He's a lovely dude. And if the loveliest dudes are like resistant to our testimony, imagine what the cunts are like. we've got no chance. Like, if the nicest people, you know, are like struggling.
We talked about it, and it was literally because he'd never experienced anything like that before. And me telling him what I'd experienced, he was like, this can't be real.
Yeah.
You know, how can this be real? But to be walking alongside me and see it, and that constant kind of defense you have to put around yourself. And it's not because people are mean. They just haven't seen anyone like you before or regularly, and have questions and expect you to answer them.
But what's really interesting, and I don't obsess about it, but I think about it a lot. I have this theory that I think everybody's got a race, and everybody to a certain extent gets judged based on what their race is. Whether or not that's racism or not is based on power dynamics. But generally speaking, like, if you're a white man in Japan, people are going to be attracted to you because it's a stereotype that, oh, you know, white guys are really hot. But it's like the space occupied by white dudes in Japan is like the space occupied by black men in a lot of other places. Right? It's like really, really odd. So everyone suffers from it. But I will maintain that Africans, men and women, both genders and everyone else, we just have it worse. Do you know what I mean? Like, if wherever you come from or whoever you are, I don't think you have the same experience as what it is to be African. Like, I went on holiday to Turkey with one of my best friends who's Indian, and we went with her family because they travel on holiday together, and I went along one time because I know her family quite well, and they could walk around Turkey without any, like, we were in Istanbul, which is a cosmopolitan place, right? This is where East and West meets. They could walk around Turkey, like this place, and not have any problem. I couldn't. I'd leave the hotel. I'd get marriage proposals. People throwing camels at me. You know, I couldn't go to markets, and I just remember thinking, but we're both different shades of brown. Like, we're both different types of other. I can't explain this. This isn't going anywhere. There's something about Africanness that seems to just make people go a bit nuts. Just one other anecdote. Last year I was in Barcelona with my partner. This is Barcelona, Barcelona. And we were on a bench, like, with the kid, and this couple walked past us and is like, "Oh, can you take a picture?" And I thought they wanted us to take a picture of them. No, they said, "Can we take your picture?" They wanted to take a picture, and he was like, "Yeah," thinking it was, you know.
Oh my God.
And I just said, "This is highly offensive." Like, in the end,
I tell you what, when I was in China, because I worked a lot in Asia quite recently, I will be appearing in so many people's holiday snaps. This random black woman. You know, sometimes people would ask me for the photo, and before I'd even said anything, they'd be posing, kind of pointing. You know that pose where somebody's pointing two fingers at you? Yeah. And I'd just be like, what? And then sometimes they wouldn't even ask, and you'd see somebody kind of pretending to do a selfie in front of you, and the camera is just kind of drifting to the left. And I was like, what do these people want pictures of me for?
They don't, and that's the crazy thing. They don't want pictures of us. They want pictures of an African capital A, which is this kind of objectified concept which they've heard about and they've probably seen on TV and rapping. And like, I think what happens is in a lot of spaces around the world that are non-black, African and African descended people are either represented as like Michelle Obama and Michael Jordan and Bob Marley, or they don't exist at all, right? They're like, we're like saints.
Oh my God, they must think we're all famous.
Well, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like when you see another African, you only ever seen Bob Marley and Denzel maybe, and you're like, oh my gosh, when I was in Morocco is in Africa. I don't need to say this, it's obvious. It's in Africa. And everyone went, Bob Marley's sister. And I just thought, this, like, first of all, like, pick another one. What about Rihanna? Like, you know, like, Bob Marley's sister, all right, but what about Janet Jackson? But second of all, like, that's ridiculous. I'm in my continent. You know, I'm in the continent I come from.
I know. Bizarre. I guess the worst thing for me is, they always pick, like, African or African American celebrities to kind of refer to me as, and they're always the ones that I'm like, no, I don't look like her. Do you know, like the ones that are just like, oh, she's a little bit choppy. What are you saying?
Oh, right.
You know, they never pick like Beyonce. Or Rihanna. It's always like somebody who's a little bit to the left of attractive.
I know what you mean. And they're doing it on purpose too. They're absolutely doing it.
I hope so.
But
it's that interesting thing where you're like, this is racism, but but there's also something else here that I'm reacting to.
Yeah, it's racism, but also like, can you not do like racism that compliment me at the same time?
And make it sexy.
Yeah, can't you flatter me? The circus world probably isn't the most diverse of spaces.
No. Well, it's interesting. Like, circus is one of those art forms that some form of it exists in every part of the world, you know. It's an art form that's about humans doing extraordinary things with their bodies, you know, and in every country that exists in some way. But when people talk about circus, they think for one of two things. So they're either thinking about classic circus, which is very European, or they're thinking about that kind of Cirque du Soleil style circus, which emerged out of Canada, which still has a very white European aesthetic. I was talking to somebody quite recently about diversity in circus. And quite often when you see black or brown people, particularly in commercial shows, they tend to be performing some kind of ethnicity. It's like people can't just have them on stage being whoever they are in an authentic way. They want to see them represent some kind of national dress. And that's what I've always worked against with my company. So I have a company, it's primarily so that I can make the work that I'm excited about and support other Black and brown circus artists have a space where they can be authentically themselves.
Yeah, and what you're describing is really frustrating because it happens in every creative industry, I think, like that pressure to, if the denial of white people having a race and the insistence that everyone else has a race, and that is the space within which they have to work in. So you have to have this accent, you've got to dress like this, you've got to dance like this, or whatever. You are challenging that with your company, which is important.
Absolutely.
But what I would hate to think is that your space was the only space in which this was probably being rectified. Do you think circus in general is improving, or do you think your space is like an oasis?
I think there is a general improvement. So that idea of representation is starting to be a conversation that's had a little bit more in the circus world. But it's not moving forward anywhere near as quickly as it should. And people are not really addressing it directly in the way that they should. You know, there's this kind of idea that circus is a space for meritocracy. Like, the only thing that people care about is what you can do. If you have the skills, you'll always succeed. And that's not true. It's not been my experience. I've been in lots of situations where I know that I haven't received a job because they wanted a chorus and they were walking down the line of the casting line with 9 blonde, skinny girls and 1 tall, black, muscular girl, and just thought, she's not going to fit. So it's that challenge of when you're in a space where people think it's a meritocracy and people think they're already liberal thinking, that they don't look around them and see all of the missing artists and think, maybe there's something systematically wrong. They kind of think, well, obviously, they just are not good enough, or they don't want to be here.
You just hit the nail on the head.
So I remember I had this conversation with somebody once when my career was starting to kind of push forwards a bit. And there was one diversity initiative that gave me an award of just like a little bit of money to do something. And that person came to me and said, this is really unfair. You have just gotten given this thing just because you're black. And I've got nothing out of that. This same person came into the industry because they were related to somebody who was quite a well-known, within the circuit. They have contacts that I would never dream of having, and a network that I would never dream of having. They get jobs that are never advertised because people don't really advertise that work when they know somebody or know somebody who knows somebody. So I was talking to somebody who had access to things because of a relationship, who was questioning my right to something else because that moment of privilege I had was based on something that was very visible about me. But the privilege that they had was fairly invisible.
I would go so far to say their privilege is very visible. People think they're entitled to it, so they ignore it. I mean, there's nothing more visible than I'm related to someone and I therefore get loads of work because of it. But what happens is people are like, yeah, but that's fine because they deserve it. And if you ask them why, the answer in their brain is they're white, but they'd never say it out loud.
I think the answer in this person's brain, and like this is a person who came out and told me that I'd taken advantage of the system because of my skin colour. I think that what was going on in his brain was that he didn't see the advantage that he had because it was like a fish being in water.
Yeah.
Something that he'd always been around. So he couldn't understand why that was a privilege. And it was just this really weird conversation that left me with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder for a while, feeling the need to prove my worth. And that is a kind of tyranny as well.
It definitely is. And like, my argument is always things that are like to do with positive action and affirmative action. The real misunderstanding is that, oh, these things were invented. Like, for us, positive action and affirmative action have been around since the beginning of time. It's just they've not benefited us before. You know, this person had benefited from affirmative action based on the fact that he has family and he's related to the industry and he has a name, and that's his. But we've never called it that. But if we just called it all positive action, like, oh, actually, this happened to you. I always use the example of football managers to talk about this, because I think it's a boring way to talk about positive action. But when you see a manager take a football club down the toilet and then get another job, and it's like, but you just flushed that job. You know, you flushed your last club down the toilet. Or when you see a manager get a job with no experience, but they want to be given a chance, well, that's affirmative action, isn't it? There's no qualifications here. There's no track record. So if I get a job based on no qualification, no track record, why are you calling it affirmative action for me? It wasn't for that guy. It wasn't for Phil Neville, you know? Yeah. So I use football language to talk to racists because they tend to understand football language. That's a good tip. But
I'm going to pick that up.
You should use the football analogy. Then I'll be, oh my gosh, why did we keep employing Steve McLaren and whatnot? It's a really good way to exemplify it. And even if they don't understand it for a minute and then forget about it. Talk a bit more about your company, because I had the pleasure of meeting some I think they were members of your company that I met when I hosted that show for you. And it was the most fun night ever. I think I might have been a bit terrible because I was having too much fun.
You were fab!
Oh, bless you. And it was a show just as it really good. You put on a beautiful showcase of artistry, and people were performing snippets of shows, either work in progress or final, at theatre, and it was packed out for the circus fans. And talk a bit about that night and what you were trying to do, and a bit more about like what's happened next after that happened.
That was a showcase that we put on. So we were working with a company called Certain Blacks, run by a guy called Clive Little, who is a little bit like my partner in crime for certain things. And it came out of a number of conversations that Clive and I had. So Clive is a black man, and he's been kind of working around circus and carnival and outdoor arts for years. And we were having this recurring conversation about people thinking there's a lack of BAME or diverse talent. And, you know, we were thinking, actually, it's not a lack. It's just the mechanisms of support aren't there. And the mechanisms of making these artists visible aren't there. So we thought we're just going to put on a shit-hot showcase of this talent. But before just kind of throwing people out in front of an audience, we're going to spend a year or so working with them to develop their artistry, to just develop their work, to make sure it's the best that it can possibly be when we present them at the showcase. So there was one piece that I was working with an artist directing her show, which was a solo piece. And then there were a number of other artists that we had mentored and supported, or there was one that we'd known about who we hadn't really worked with, but wanted to. And we brought them together to put on this night. And it wasn't just about Black performers or Asian performers. It was about presenting people a vision of actually what diversity really is. You know, this idea that we're all in minorities. But when you actually look at all of those identities that are marginalised in some way, they form the majority of the population. So we had a visually impaired aerialist, Amelia Carvalho, who's created this kind of drag persona called Tito Bone. We had Hawk and Sadiq, who are this Chinese pole duo, who are working around themes. So Sadiq is from an Islamic background, but he came out maybe 5 or 6 years ago as really exploring what it means to be gay and Muslim using the vehicle of Chinese pole. So all of this is work that for us firmly sits outside the mainstream. And that's the world in which we operate in, everything that's outside the mainstream. And it was an amazing night, and everybody had a great time and learned something new and saw something exciting and realised that the circus world is bigger than they think it is.
Oh, like massively so. And I learned loads and met some of the most wonderful, most joyful people, and flexible people as well. Some of the stretching I saw in the green room, I was like, come on, keep it social. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel very inadequate.
That's how we say hello to each other. You walk into the room, you drop into a split.
What are your dreams for circus? What does the world look like for circus in 5 years' time that would make you sit back in your armchair and drink that posh wine you know so much about and think, I've done good?
You know what? It's really difficult now with everything that's going on. I think the world of the arts is really struggling. So dreaming is kind of quite a challenge at the moment. But the things that I would like to see for the circus sector is I'd like to see 3 things. I'd like to see more spaces for people to be able to create, spaces where they can explore and experiment. Quite a lot of my practice is around thinking about not just making shows. We make shows that kind of tour around the country and internationally that are about entertaining people and kind of giving them that moment of inspiration and entertainment. But I'm really interested in what circus can do for the world. So one strand of the work that we're doing at the moment is we are taking circus into care homes. And we're working with staff and residents and family members of the residents in the home to look at the ways in which circus can not just entertain them, but find ways to communicate, using object manipulation and juggling to moments with people who are non-verbal. That kind of passing of an object between people is a really, really beautiful thing. And there was this lovely moment in one of the care homes where we were exploring kind of contact and lifting work with staff members, because the way that they lift residents is really medicalized and formal. And we work with a practice which is about kind of using lifting and, we work with a way that we find a way to build trust really, really quickly through touch, so we can do extraordinary things between 2 bodies. So we were looking at giving the staff tools to kind of touch and lift in different ways that were perhaps less impersonal. And the most amazing thing that came out of the first residency that we did in the care home was the manager of the care home came to us afterwards and said, this program has made me realise that I've been underestimating the people that I'm looking after. Because everybody came into the process as a beginner. And with circus, you never know where the talent is going to appear. So you had residents and their carers trying to learn how to juggle. And carers suddenly seeing these residents kind of streaming ahead of them in kind of learning these new skills where they were struggling, and realising that, that there is so much more to a person than you can see on the surface.
It's exactly what you were saying, using circus as a tool to communicate. Like, what better way to communicate the fact that you still have purpose and the capacity to learn than basically telling the people who work for you, I can juggle and you can't.
Yeah, exactly. The capacity to learn.
It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
It's the capacity to learn, the capacity to do something new, and also the need to have some element of risk.
Yes.
As part of how you live. As human beings, we negotiate risk all the time, and that's, part of the pleasure of life. And you choose your level of risk accordingly, of course. But But when you suddenly got duty of care over looking after somebody who you see as fragile, how do you allow them to have that kind of agency to take safe risks and feel like they're kind of engaged in life in a normal way?
I find that concept quite moving, to be honest, because it hadn't, when you put older people into care, you're not thinking about them thriving, you're just thinking of them eating, being entertained a bit and going to bed. But I've always thought we don't look after older people well enough anyway.
Yeah, I think we're not very good at kind of thinking about how we deal with getting older as individuals.
Right.
But we're also just not good at thinking how, as a society, we take care of the older people. Actually, not just take care of the older people, but also enable them to live purposeful and useful lives for as long as possible.
Which is exactly what we should be doing, rather than kind of checking people out and saying, okay, now you get to sit here and stare out the window all day. That's not fulfilling at all.
No, not at all.
On that note, I'd like to end with a very important question for you. This is a question that I can only ask you. I've never asked it to anyone else. No one else is qualified to answer it. But you're qualified. So this evening, I've not eaten yet, but I'm going to be having omelette and chips for dinner. What wine should I be accompanying?
Okay, so your omelette and chips are going to be kind of containing a fair amount of fat. You're going to want something citrusy, not too citrusy, to cut through that. Do you like sweet wines?
I'm not the biggest fan of sweet wines. I would say medium sweet is I can just about manage.
Yeah, I would probably go for something like a Gewürztraminer that's just on the edge of sweet. So it's got a really kind of floral flavour, but with kind of pear and citrus tones underneath.
Would that be an old world?
I think that will go
wine?
really well with the chips.
Is that an old world wine? Yes, I don't know.
It's a European wine. Yeah, German.
Just making this up. I just thought, ask her the question. That makes you sound intelligent.
Ask her now. I'm fully expecting from now on, every time you sit down from a meal, you'll be texting me saying, what wine with this?
We only have one bottle in the house. It's a dumb question for me to ask, and it's a red. I'm actually like a bottle wine cellar. I don't have a wine. I've literally got one bottle left over from Christmas. I've not even touched yet.
When we're out of quarantine, I'm going to take you wine shopping.
Oh, girl, I'm writing that down, and I'm gonna, definitely. I'm gonna remind you of that. But yeah, that would be wonderful. I know very little about wines, other than I have this thing called has it got knockback ability? That's what I used to say. Oh yeah, it's got good knockback ability. That was my wine.
Are you one of these people that drinks wine to get drunk?
No.
Or do you want to have a taste experience?
I'm actually not a big drinker. I should be kinder to myself. I'm not a big drinker at all, and I do enjoy wine that tastes good, but I don't have good knowledge of like what I couldn't guess if the wine was good based on what the label says or based on the knowledge.
We'll sort that out. I'll give you a little tip for red wine.
Okay.
If you pick up the bottle, underneath the bottle there's kind of like a dimple. If you've got a bottle with quite a deep dimple, so that you can hold the bottle from the base, put your thumb in the dimple and hold it steady, it's likely to be a reasonable wine.
Oh.
That counts for reds only.
That's good because I'm a red wine drinker. So it's not going to be one of those wines that leaves my mouth all red, leaves my teeth all red. No. None of them ones. Okay, that's good to know. Vicki, this has been a pleasure, a genuine pleasure. My only regret is that I'm not here to reward you with plantain and the one bottle of wine that I have in my house to offer you. That would have probably disgusted you.
I'm gutted about the plantain, but not about the wine.
All right, well... When we go wine shopping, we're going to round it off with a plate of fried plantain and shitter. I guarantee it.
Yes.
That was Vicki Amedume. Didn't I tell you the conversation would be sublime? It really was. Thank you, Vicki, for coming on to my podcast. And look, I always find out about the hidden talents that my friends have. Not only is she a circus performer who can do a backflip, she's a sommelier, she can design databases. I'm very much looking forward to going wine shopping and plantain eating when this is over. Something to look forward to for sure. My name's Athena Kableni. Thank you so much for listening. If you like the podcast, tell your friends about it, share, comment. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm around. I'm easy to find. I don't hide on the internet. So yeah, get in touch and it would be nice to hear from you. I hope you've enjoyed it and we'll catch up next time.